The air in the break room at Memorial Health University Medical Center was thick with the scent of stale coffee and microwave popcorn, a smell Simone Dubois associated with the bone-deep exhaustion that had become her constant companion. She rubbed the small of her back, a dull ache radiating through her 55-year-old frame. 12 hours. 12 hours of beeping machines, demanding patience, and the relentless pressure of holding lives in her hands. At her age, the job was less a calling and more an act of sheer endurance. But Simone never complained. Complaining was a luxury she couldn't afford, not with her financial reality etched into the worry lines around her eyes. "Simone, Mr. Henderson's family in 3002 is asking for you," a fresh-faced intern chirped from the doorway, her youth a stark contrast to the weariness clinging to Simone like the humid savannah air. "Coming," Simone nodded, her voice raspy. She wiped her hands on a coarse paper towel and glanced at her reflection. The woman staring back at her was a testament to a life lived on the front lines, of healthcare, of single motherhood, of being a black woman in a city that prized its genteel, moss-draped history over the present-day struggles of its people. Her skin, a deep, rich brown, had lost some of its youthful tautness, but her dark eyes, though tired, still held a flicker of the fire that had gotten her this far. She smoothed down her short, curly hair, the streaks of gray looking more prominent under the harsh fluorescent light. It was past 9 when her old Chevy sedan finally rattled into the driveway of her small bungalow on the west side of town. It was a modest house, bought with sweat and sacrifice, but in the dim glow of the single functioning street lamp, it looked more weary than welcoming. A light on in the living room meant her daughter Maya was home. For a moment, Simone felt a pang of hope. Lately, 26-year-old Maya had been a ghost in their shared home, citing double shifts at the downtown diner where she worked as a waitress. Simone suspected a new boyfriend was the real reason, a thought that brought a complicated mix of hope and apprehension. "Maya," she called out, the screen door groaning shut behind her. A muffled, "In here," drifted from the living room. Simone found her daughter sprawled on the worn floral couch, her face illuminated by the blue light of her phone. Maya was a vision, the kind of beauty that turned heads on River Street. She had her mother's eyes, but with a youthful fire, long legs that seemed to go on forever, and a defiant mane of copper-dyed curls that framed a face perpetually set in a pout of dissatisfaction. She was a vibrant splash of color in their muted beige world. "You eat?" Simone asked, her daily ritual of attempted connection. She set her heavy bag on the small kitchen table. "Grabbed something at work," Maya replied, her thumb scrolling endlessly, her voice flat with indifference. Simone sighed, the sound lost in the hum of the old refrigerator. Their relationship had long ago devolved into a cold war, punctuated by brief, fragile truces. To Maya, Simone was the anchor holding her to this city, the woman whose quiet life of careful saving and weary acceptance was a cage. Maya saw Savannah not for its historic squares and romantic Spanish moss, but for its invisible walls, the subtle and not-so-subtle racism that she felt capped her potential, relegating her to serving tourists overpriced shrimp and grits for tips that barely covered her gas. To Simone, Maya was a girl who couldn't see the blessings in front of her, always chasing a glittering, unattainable future she saw on her phone screen. "I paid the power bill," Simone said, pulling leftovers from the fridge. "Water is due next week. Your turn." Maya's eyes rolled so hard Simone could practically hear it. "Still stuffing cash under the floorboards, Ma? It's 2023. Get a bank account." "My money is my business," Simone cut her off, the words sharper than she intended. She didn't tell her daughter about the box, the old cedar-lined box hidden beneath a loose floorboard in her bedroom closet. Inside, meticulously bundled and counted, was just over $85,000. It was the culmination of 15 years of scrimping, of extra shifts, of foregoing vacations and small pleasures. It was her rainy day fund, her retirement, her last stand against a world that had already betrayed her once. She hadn't trusted a bank since the 2008 financial crisis had swallowed her previous home, and her faith in the system whole. That money was her secret, her security, her one tangible piece of peace. Trying to bridge the chasm between them, Simone asked, "How was work?" Maya shrugged, a gesture of profound boredom. "The usual. Served a table of frat boys from up north who thought it was hilarious to ask if I was one of the good ones, before leaving a 5% tip and trying to grope my ass. Simone's lips tightened. Maya, your language? It's the truth, Ma. You know what else is true? I'm going to be stuck in this city forever, smelling like fried fish and smiling at racists for pocket change. The familiar tirade began to build, and Simone felt her own exhaustion rising to meet it. You could always go to Savannah Tech, Simone offered tiredly. I'd help with tuition. On a nurse's salary? Maya snorted, the sound dripping with contempt. And what about rent, books, food? You want me to live on ramen and hope? If you really wanted it, you'd find a way, Simone countered, her voice flat. Scholarships, grants, loans, other people manage. Maya defiantly turned her full attention back to her phone, the blue light a shield against any further conversation. The argument was over. Simone didn't push. She was too tired to fight the same losing battle again. She ate her cold chicken alone in the quiet kitchen, the silence between the two rooms of the house heavier than any words. Later that night, long after Maya had retreated to her room, Simone quietly crept into her own closet. She pried up the loose floorboard, the wood groaning softly. She lifted the lid of the cedar box just to look at it. The neat stacks of bills were a comfort, a physical manifestation of her resilience. She ran her fingers over the top bundle, her silent promise to herself. As she carefully replaced the box and the floorboard, she didn't notice that Maya's bedroom door was cracked open just enough for one eye to see. She didn't see the flicker in her daughter's gaze as it fixed on the spot on the floor where her mother's entire life savings lay hidden, an expression not of simple greed, but of a sudden, dangerous, and all-consuming idea. Simone's day off was a rare gift, a brief respite from the relentless cycle of work and worry. She'd decided to treat herself, not to a shopping spree or a fancy lunch, but to a simple, solitary walk through Savannah's historic district. The city, on a sun-drenched Tuesday morning, was putting on its best face. Tourists ambled along the cobblestone streets of River Street. The air was sweet with the smell of blooming jasmine and salty from the nearby river. And the grand oak trees, draped in dramatic shawls of Spanish moss, filtered the sunlight into a dappled, dreamy pattern on the sidewalks. For a moment, Simone could almost forget the weight on her shoulders and just be a woman enjoying the beauty of her city. As she neared Chippewa Square, a flash of red and the sound of a heated yet controlled voice drew her attention. A tow truck was hooked up to a sleek, late-model black sedan, and a tall, impeccably dressed black man was arguing with the driver. "Sir, I'm telling you, the meter was broken. I was only gone for 10 minutes to meet a client," the man said, his voice a smooth baritone, laced with frustration but devoid of the raw anger Simone was used to hearing in such confrontations. "Not my problem, buddy," the tow truck driver, a heavy-set white man with a sunburned neck, grunted indifferently. "Pay the $150 ticket and the drop fee, or I take it to the impound. Your choice." Simone would normally have walked on by. It wasn't her business, but something about the man held her. It wasn't just his striking good looks, broad shoulders filling out a crisp dress shirt, a sharp haircut, and a face that looked like it was carved from polished mahogany. It was his dignity. In a situation designed to be humiliating, he held himself with an unshakable poise that Simone, who had faced her own share of casual dismissals and bureaucratic nonsense, found deeply compelling. "I don't carry that kind of cash on me," the man said, gesturing with his hands in a gesture of pure exasperation. "My wallet and phone are in the car. Can't you just let me get them so I can use an app to pay?" "Rules are rules," the driver said, clearly enjoying his small moment of power. Simone acted before she thought. The loneliness of the past few days, the fight with Maya, the simple human unfairness of the scene, it all coalesced into a single, impulsive act. "How much is the total?" she asked, her voice surprising even herself. The man turned, and his dark eyes met hers. For a split second, a micro-expression flashed across his face, a sharp, assessing glint, so quick she almost missed it. But then it was gone, replaced by a look of surprised gratitude and a warm, disarming smile that seemed to light up his entire face. $150, ma'am," he replied, his voice softening. "But please, you don't have to concern yourself. This is my mess." Ignoring him, Simone opened her purse. She rarely carried much cash, but she'd just been to the bank for grocery money. She counted out 8 $20 bills and handed them to the tow truck driver. "This is $160. Is that enough?" The driver, stunned into a rare moment of civility, nodded, took the cash, unhooked the car, and drove off without another word. The man stood there, looking from his car to Simone, seemingly speechless. You just saved me," he finally said, his smile growing wider, revealing a perfect set of white teeth. "I'm Tristan Cole, and I am deeply in your debt." "Simone Dubois," she introduced herself, feeling a strange flush creep up her neck under his intense gaze. "It was nothing. We all need a little help sometimes." "Nothing? Ma'am, you were a guardian angel?" Tristan insisted. "Please, let me at least buy you a coffee. I have to thank you properly." Simone's first instinct was to refuse, to retreat back into the comfortable anonymity of her day. But something in his eyes, a genuine warmth that seemed to melt away her defenses, made her hesitate. "All right," she heard herself say, "but just a quick one. I have errands to run." 15 minutes later, they were seated in a quiet corner of the Paris market, the chicest coffee shop in town. The contrast was not lost on Simone. One moment she was counting her dollars for groceries, the next she was sitting across from a man who looked like he belonged on the cover of a magazine. Tristan was a masterful conversationalist. He listened intently, his eyes never leaving hers, making her feel like the most interesting person in the world. He was 33, he said, an investor from Atlanta who had recently moved to Savannah. He saw potential here, a city on the cusp of a tech and real estate boom. "You know, Ms. Dubois," he said, leaning forward conspiratorially, "I didn't have it easy. Grew up in a rough part of Atlanta. No father figure, a mother working 2 jobs. I made some mistakes, got into some trouble as a kid." He painted a vivid picture of a young man pulling himself up by his bootstraps, a story that resonated with Simone's own struggles. "What changed?" she asked, surprised at how easily the conversation flowed. "I met a mentor," Tristan replied, a flicker of what looked like real emotion in his eyes. "An older gentleman who saw something in me. He taught me that your circumstances don't have to be your destiny. He taught me to use my head, to see opportunities where others see obstacles." "And what opportunities do you see in Savannah?" Simone asked, captivated by his infectious enthusiasm. "Oh, Simone, may I call you Simone?" At her nod, he continued, his voice dropping to an exciting whisper. "This city is a gold mine. People see old buildings. I see boutique hotels. They see empty warehouses by the port. I see logistics hubs for tech. I'm putting together a deal right now, a small biotech startup. It's revolutionary stuff, but it's all about timing and capital." He spoke of venture capitalists and seed rounds and market disruption, words that were foreign to Simone but sounded thrilling coming from him. He never once made her feel foolish for not understanding, instead framing it as sharing a secret world with her. As they got up to leave, he took her hand. His touch was warm and firm. "Simone Dubois, you have no idea how much you helped me today. It was more than the money. It was the kindness," he said, his gaze so sincere it made her heart flutter. "Can I take you to dinner to thank you properly? Friday night?" The "no" was on the tip of her tongue, a conditioned response from years of self-reliance and solitude. But the word that came out was, "Yes, I'd like that." He smiled that brilliant smile again, and as he left the coffee shop, Simone stood frozen for a moment, a feeling she hadn't experienced in years bubbling up inside her. It felt dangerously like hope. She was completely unaware that as Tristan Cole walked down Broughton Street, he pulled out his phone, not to call a client, but to send a simple 2-word text to a number saved under M. It's on. While the old-world charm of Savannah's historic district was working its magic on Simone Dubois, a starkly different scene was unfolding a few miles away, in a place untouched by tourism or beauty. The Starlight Motel, squatting on the frayed edge of town off I-16, was a monument to transience and quiet desperation. The paint was peeling, the neon sign flickered erratically, and the air hung heavy with the smell of damp carpet and disappointment. In room 112, the man who called himself Tristan Cole was lounging on a lumpy bed, the very picture of relaxation. The crisp dress shirt was gone, replaced by a simple t-shirt that hugged his muscular frame. Across from him, applying makeup in the cracked bathroom mirror, was Maya. "So you really think she bought it?" Maya asked, her voice a mixture of awe and anxiety. She met his gaze in the mirror. "The whole damsel in distress thing?" Tristan chuckled, a low, confident sound. "Baby, it wasn't a thing. It was a performance. And your mother was the perfect audience. Lonely, a little beaten down by life, but proud. The kind of woman who's just dying for a knight in shining armor to show up, even if he's driving a financed sedan." He swung his legs off the bed and walked up behind her, wrapping his arms around her waist. He nuzzled her neck, his charm as potent in this grimy room as it was in the chic downtown cafe. "You should have seen her, Maya, the way she looked at me. It's like taking candy from a baby." A flicker of discomfort crossed Maya's face. "Don't forget, that's my mother we're talking about." Tristan's grip tightened slightly. The same mother who's sitting on $85,000 while her beautiful daughter serves greasy burgers to tourists for chump change? The same mother who'd rather let that money rot under a floorboard than help you get out of this dead-end town and build a real life? His voice was a seductive whisper in her ear, twisting her own resentment into a justification for their plan. Maya didn't answer. He was just repeating the same bitter words she had screamed at him 2 months ago on their third night together. They had met at the diner, of course. He'd been a new, handsome face, a big tipper who flirted with an easy confidence that made her feel seen. He started waiting for her after her shifts, listening to her complain about her life, her mother, her feeling of being trapped. It was in a fit of alcohol-fueled frustration that she'd let it slip. The story of her mother's secret stash, the rainy day money she felt, was a monument to her mother's fear and her own imprisonment. Tristan had seen the opportunity instantly. He'd done this before, in different cities, with different women. He was a predator who specialized in sniffing out the unique vulnerabilities of lonely people. In Simone, he saw a mark. In Maya, he saw the key. "We take that money," he continued, his lips trailing along her jawline, "and we disappear. We'll drive out to California, get a place in Santa Monica. You'll never have to say, 'Would you like fries with that?' again. You'll be living the life you deserve. A queen." "And the wedding?" Maya asked, pulling away slightly to look at him. It was the part of the fantasy she clung to the most. "You promised we'd get married." "Of course, baby," Tristan smiled, turning on the full force of his charm. "As soon as we get the money, a big, beautiful wedding on a beach in Malibu. Whatever you want." Maya nodded, the hesitation in her eyes warring with the glittering promise of his words. She loved him. Or she loved the idea of him. The handsome, ambitious man who was her ticket out. He was the antidote to the suffocating quiet of her mother's house, the embodiment of every dream she nursed while wiping down sticky tables. "I should go," she said, pulling away from his grasp. "Ma will start wondering where I am. She thinks I'm at the library studying for the college entrance exam." The lie tasted bitter in her mouth. "Go," Tristan nodded, giving her a quick, hard kiss. "And remember the plan. Be a little cold to me when I'm around. Let her think you're the jealous, protective daughter. It'll make her trust me even more. She'll see me as her thing, not something that threatens her relationship with you." Maya left, the flimsy motel door clicking shut behind her. As her footsteps faded down the concrete walkway, Tristan leaned back on the pillows, a contented, predatory smile spreading across his face. The plan was flawless. The daughter had provided the intel and the emotional cover. The mother, bless her lonely heart, was already half in his pocket. Soon, he'd have her money. And then he'd decide what to do about Maya. He might take her with him for a little while. The girl was undeniably hot, a fun distraction. But a wedding in Malibu, a shared life, he almost laughed out loud. He didn't share. The money was the prize. $85,000 was more than enough to set himself up somewhere new. Maybe Miami, or even Vegas. It was a life-changing score. As for the 2 women he was leaving behind in Savannah, they'd have nothing but their broken hearts and a shared betrayal. But by then, he'd be 1,000 miles away, a ghost with a new name and a full bank account. He picked up his phone and scrolled through his contacts, his thumb hovering over a name, Lavoris, ATL. He'd need a little help disappearing once the money was in hand. He grinned. Yes, the plan was working like a charm. The next 2 weeks unfolded like a masterfully directed play. with Tristan Cole as the leading man and Simone Dubois as his captivated audience. Tristan was relentless in his courtship, a methodical campaign designed to dismantle the walls Simone had spent years building around her heart. He was a student of human loneliness, and he knew exactly which notes to play. The dinners were first, not just meals, but events. He took her to the old pink house, its colonial-era elegance making Simone feel like royalty. They sat in a candlelit corner, and he listened, truly seemed to listen, as she spoke about her years at the hospital, the small triumphs and the heartbreaking losses. He made her feel that her quiet, hard-working life was a story worth telling. He took her for a walk along River Street at sunset, the sky painted in strokes of orange and purple, and bought her a sweetgrass rose from one of the Gula Geche artisans, a simple, thoughtful gesture that meant more than any expensive jewelry could. The gifts were small but achingly personal. A rare nursing history book he claimed to have found in an antique shop, a lavender-scented candle because she'd once mentioned she had trouble sleeping. He called her every day, not with demands, but just to ask, "How was your day, Simone? Did you get a chance to put your feet up?" Each call, each small kindness was a chisel, chipping away at her defenses. He spun stories of his difficult past, a carefully curated blend of truth and fiction. He spoke of a grandmother who raised him, of the mentors who saved him, of his burning desire to build something that would last, something that would make them proud. The stories were designed to create a parallel between them, two people who had fought for everything they had. They were so sincere, so emotionally resonant, that Simone found herself not just believing him, but feeling a deep, protective connection to the man he presented himself to be. Meanwhile, Maya played her part to perfection. Whenever Tristan came to the house to pick Simone up, Maya would be a storm cloud of passive aggression. She'd offer clipped, one-word answers, keep her eyes glued to her phone, and sigh dramatically as they left. To Simone, it was the predictable jealousy of a daughter who wasn't used to sharing her mother. It was frustrating, but also, in a strange way, reassuring. It made her relationship with Tristan feel even more real, something that was hers and hers alone. "Don't you think he's a little smooth?" Maya would ask after a date, planting a seed of doubt she knew her mother would dismiss. "A little too good to be true?" "You're just not used to seeing me happy," Simone would reply, a touch of defensiveness in her voice. "You don't know him, Maya." And she was right. Simone didn't know him. She didn't know that, after dropping her off with a lingering, gentle kiss, Tristan would often drive straight to the Starlight Motel. There, he and Maya would laugh about the performance, counting down the days. "She bought a new dress," Maya told him one night, a mixture of guilt and excitement in her voice. "I haven't seen her buy a new dress in 10 years. She looks different. Younger." "That's our magic, baby," Tristan had whispered back, pulling her close. "We're making her happy, and she's going to make us rich." The moment to spring the trap came exactly 2 weeks after their first meeting. Tristan had begun to subtly weave his business into their conversations. He'd take important calls in front of her, speaking in low, urgent tones about seed funding and final-stage investors. He'd show her impressive-looking and entirely fake charts and projections on his tablet. One evening, over a bottle of wine at her small kitchen table, he finally made his move. He took her hand, his expression a perfect blend of passion and vulnerability. "Simone," he began, his voice thick with emotion, "these last 2 weeks, they've been the best of my life. You've made me feel things I didn't think I was capable of feeling." Simone's heart hammered against her ribs. He was the first man in over a decade who made her feel beautiful, desired, alive. "I want to build a future, Simone, with you," he continued, his eyes locking onto hers. "But to do that, I need to secure my own future first. My biotech deal, it's at a critical point. We have a major investor lined up, but they won't commit until we show we have the last piece of operational capital secured. It's a make-or-break moment." Simone tensed, a knot of apprehension forming in her stomach. "I know you have your savings," Tristan said gently, as if reading her mind. "And I know you don't trust the banks. I respect that. But that money, it's just sitting there, losing value to inflation. What if it could work for you? For us?" He laid out the proposition. It wasn't a loan, he stressed. It was a partnership. He needed $85,000 to close the deal. He promised that within 3 months, not only would she get her principal back, but she would also receive a 50% share of the profits from the initial sale of their patent. He projected a return of at least $40,000. Think about it, he whispered, his thumb stroking the back of her hand. A down payment on a bigger house, helping Maya finally go to college without drowning in debt. A trip to Paris, like you've always dreamed of. This money isn't just money, Simone. It's freedom. He saw the hesitation, the fear, the lifetime of caution warring with the dazzling fantasy he was painting. He knew he had to let the hook set. "Don't give me an answer now," he said, standing up to leave. "Just think about it. But Simone, my supplier for the lab equipment, their offer is only good until the end of the week." He kissed her deeply, a kiss full of promise and manufactured passion. As Simone stood in her doorway watching his car's taillights disappear down the street, she felt a dizzying mix of terror and exhilaration. She was standing on the edge of a cliff, and Tristan Cole was asking her to jump, promising her that together they would fly. She had no idea that he was the one who had led her to the edge, and he had no intention of jumping with her. The next 3 days were a quiet, personal hell for Simone Dubois. The house, usually a sanctuary, became a pressure cooker for her anxieties. Every creak of the floorboards seemed to whisper a warning. Every shadow in the corner seemed to mock her indecision. She went to work on autopilot, her hands performing the familiar tasks of a nurse while her mind raced in a frantic, exhausting loop. On one side was the voice of reason, the voice she had honed over a lifetime of hardship. It was the voice that had guided her through the aftermath of a bad divorce, the loss of her home in 2008, and the lonely years of raising a child on her own. It screamed that this was madness, giving her entire life savings, the shield she had painstakingly built against the world's uncertainties, to a man she'd known for a little over 2 weeks, was the definition of foolishness. The phrase, "too good to be true," echoed in her thoughts, a relentless drumbeat of caution. But on the other side was the seductive melody of Tristan's voice. It spoke of a future free from the gnawing ache of financial worry. It whispered of companionship, of waking up next to someone, of sharing a cup of coffee in the morning silence. It painted a vivid picture of a life where she wasn't just Simone the nurse or Simone the mother, but Simone the desired woman, the savvy investor, the partner. He had reawakened a part of her she thought had died long ago, the part that dared to want more than just survival. She tried to talk to Maya, hoping for some semblance of guidance, but her daughter was a closed door. "He's asking for how much?" Maya had scoffed, feigning outrage. "Ma, are you crazy? You can't be serious. He's a con man." The simulated concern was a brilliant piece of acting. It pushed Simone further into Tristan's corner, making her feel as though she had to defend him, and by extension, her own judgment and her chance at happiness. "You don't know him?" Simone had snapped, the wedge between them driven deeper. The torment continued until Wednesday evening. Simone was sitting at her kitchen table, staring at the unpaid water bill when her phone buzzed. It was Tristan. His voice was electric, buzzing with an energy that crackled through the phone. "Simone, you are not going to believe this," he exclaimed, without even a hello. "I just got off a conference call with a potential buyer in California, a major pharmaceutical company. They've seen our preliminary data. They're so impressed, they've made a preemptive offer to buy the patent as soon as it's finalized. Simone, this isn't just a home run. It's a grand slam. Our profits will be double what I projected, maybe even triple." His excitement was a contagion. It swept through Simone's doubts, burning them away like a fever. The final piece of the puzzle clicked into place. This was real. This was happening. The universe was finally giving her a win. "I'm in," she said, her voice trembling slightly. "I'll do it." There was a pause on the other end, followed by a low, heartfelt, "Simone, you will not regret this. This is the beginning of everything for us." That night, a thick, soupy savanna fog rolled in from the river, blanketing the city in a ghostly silence. Simone told Maya she was going out for a late-night coffee with a friend from work. She asked Tristan to meet her at her house, timing it for when she knew Maya would be gone. He arrived looking like the embodiment of success, dressed in a dark, well-fitting suit. He carried a sleek leather gym bag. The air in the small living room was thick with anticipation. Without much ceremony, Simone led him to her bedroom. Her hands trembled as she knelt and pried up the familiar loose floorboard. The sound of the wood groaning seemed unnaturally loud in the quiet house. She lifted out the old cedar box, its weight feeling both immense and insignificant. She placed it on the bed and opened the lid. The neat stacks of hundreds, fifties, and twenties, the physical sum of 15 years of her life, lay exposed. Tristan stared at the money, and for a fleeting moment, the mask slipped. His eyes widened, a raw, naked greed flashing in their depths. But he recovered in a heartbeat, replacing it with a look of profound, solemn gratitude. "You won't regret this, Simone," he said, his voice a reverent whisper as he began transferring the bundles of cash into his gym bag. "We're in this together now. Partners." Simone nodded, her throat too tight to speak. She felt a strange sense of vertigo, as if she were watching herself from a great distance, a foolish woman handing over her entire world to a handsome stranger. A tiny, panicked voice screamed in the back of her mind that she was making the biggest mistake of her life, but it was drowned out by the roar of hope and the promise of his words. The money was gone. It had passed from her hands to his. He zipped the bag shut and pulled her into a tight embrace. "Thank you for trusting me," he murmured into her hair. "You have no idea what this means." Oh, but she thought she did. She thought it meant a new beginning. She rested her head on his shoulder, clinging to the solid feel of him, trying to absorb his confidence. As he walked out the door and disappeared into the foggy night, the gym bag heavy with her future in his hand, Simone sank onto the edge of her bed. The empty cedar box sat open like a wound, and a sudden, chilling sense of dread washed over her, cold and absolute. It was the feeling of a gambler who had just pushed all her chips to the center of the table and realized, a second too late, that she had never even seen the other player's cards. Dawn broke over Savannah with a painter's hand, streaking the sky with soft pinks and lavenders. In Forsyth Park, the city's 30-acre green heart, the morning was serene. A handful of dedicated joggers made their way along the shaded paths, their breath misting in the cool air. The famous white fountain stood as a silent, elegant centerpiece. But in a more remote, marshy section of the park, near the less-traveled southern edge, a different kind of scene was about to spoil the morning's tranquility. A man jogging with his golden retriever saw it first. The dog, usually single-minded in its pursuit of squirrels, suddenly stopped, its ears perked, a low growl rumbling in its chest. It pulled hard on the leash, leading its owner off the path toward a thicket of palmettos and ancient oaks heavy with Spanish moss. And there, half submerged in the dark, brackish water at the edge of the marsh, was a body, face down. A dark, expensive-looking suit was ruined with mud and something darker that stained the water around it. By 7 a.m., the idyllic scene was a chaotic tableau of flashing blue and red lights. Yellow police tape cordoned off the area, a garish scar on the natural landscape. Detective Isaiah Vance of the Savannah Police Department arrived, his face a grim mask. At 45, Vance had been a cop long enough to know that his city's picturesque beauty often served as a backdrop for its ugliest human dramas. He was a tall, broad-shouldered black man with a quiet, observant nature that made people underestimate him, often to their detriment. "What we got, Daniels?" he asked a younger uniformed officer, his voice a low rumble that cut through the morning chatter. "Jogger found him about an hour ago, sir." Officer Daniels, a young white cop with an eager-to-impress attitude, replied. "Looks like a black male, maybe mid-30s, dressed sharp, probably a deal gone wrong. You know how it is in this part of town." Vance's eyes narrowed slightly at the casual assumption. This part of town was a historic park frequented by everyone. But Daniel's comment revealed a familiar, lazy narrative. A well-dressed black man found dead equals drugs or gangs. Vance ignored the prejudice and knelt by the edge of the tape, his gaze sweeping the scene. The victim was lying in a position that suggested he'd been pushed or had fallen forward. The back of his expensive suit jacket was punctured with multiple vicious tears, soaked through with blood. The medical examiner, a no-nonsense woman named Dr. Chen, was already on the scene. "Multiple stab wounds to the back and abdomen," she confirmed to Vance. "Looks like a frenzy. A lot of rage in this. Time of death is likely sometime between 10 p.m. last night and 2 a.m. this morning." "Robbery?" Vance asked. "Possible," Dr. Chen said, "but his wallet is still in his back pocket." Vance watched as a crime scene tech carefully extracted the wallet with forceps, placing it in an evidence bag. It was a high-end leather wallet. Inside, a driver's license identified the victim, Tristan Cole, age 33. Address listed in Atlanta. Wallet's here, but there's no cash in it. No credit cards either, the tech reported, and no cell phone on him or in the immediate vicinity. This was odd. A robber who took cash and cards but left a designer wallet and a body? It felt sloppy or personal. Vance's gaze continued to scan the area. The ground was soft and muddy, a mess of footprints from the first responders. He noted the victim's expensive dress shoes, caked in mud. He hadn't been jogging. He'd been brought here or had met someone here. "Detective," another officer called out. "We found a car registered to him about a quarter-mile away, parked on a side street, a black sedan. Looks clean." Vance walked the scene's perimeter, his mind working, piecing together the fragmented story. A man from Atlanta, dressed for a business meeting or a fancy date, ends up stabbed to death in a park. It wasn't a simple mugging. The violence was too intimate, too furious. Daniels's deal gone wrong theory was still a possibility, but Vance's gut told him this was something else. This felt like passion, like a betrayal that had boiled over into bloodshed. He moved closer to the body, now that Dr. Chen and her team had begun their work. He noticed the victim's left hand, clenched in the mud. He asked the tech to get a close-up photo before they moved him. As he looked at the magnified image on the digital camera's screen, he saw it. It was faint but unmistakable. Around the victim's wrist was a thin, reddish line, an indentation. It wasn't from a watch. It was a sharp, angry mark, as if a piece of jewelry had been violently ripped from his arm, taking a layer of skin with it. This wasn't just a murder. It was personal. Someone hadn't just wanted Tristan Cole dead. They had wanted to take something back from him. And Vance had a feeling that whatever was missing from that wrist was the key to the entire case. Detective Vance's investigation began where most murder investigations do, with the last known person to see the victim alive. The name Simone Dubois had come up quickly. Tristan Cole's recent calls showed multiple contacts with her, and a receipt from the old pink house found in his car confirmed a dinner for two the previous night. When Vance and his partner, a young sharp detective named Elena Sanchez, knocked on Simone's door, she answered, looking pale and drawn, her eyes red-rimmed as if she'd been crying all night. She played the part of the grieving, shocked lover with heartbreaking authenticity. "Dead?" she whispered, her hand flying to her mouth as Vance broke the news. "No, that can't be. I just saw him." She sank into a chair in her modest living room, her body trembling. Vance let the silence sit for a moment before he began his questions, his voice gentle but firm. "Ms. Dubois, can you walk me through your evening with him?" Simone recounted the story, her voice choked with emotion. "They had a wonderful dinner," she said. "He was so full of life, so excited about a business deal he was closing." She told them he'd been seeing her for a couple of weeks, that it was new but felt very serious. She said he walked her to the door around 9:30 p.m. They kissed goodnight, and he left. She hadn't heard from him since. "Did he seem worried about anything? Did he mention any enemies, any deals that were going sour?" Sanchez asked. "No, not at all," Simone said, shaking her head. "He was on top of the world. He said this deal was going to change his life." Her voice broke, and she buried her face in her hands. It was a compelling performance. If Vance hadn't seen the rage in the victim's wounds, he might have believed it completely. But something felt off, a professional instinct, a small, nagging inconsistency in her story. He decided to probe a different angle. "Did Mr. Cole know anyone else in Savannah? Any friends or family?" Vance asked. Simone hesitated for a fraction of a second too long. "Not that I know of. He said he was new in town." "What about your daughter, Maya? Did they know each other?" Simone's posture stiffened almost imperceptibly. "They'd met a few times when he came to pick me up. That's all." "They didn't get along?" Sanchez pressed. "Maya can be protective," Simone said, choosing her words carefully. "She's a typical daughter, wary of a new man in her mother's life. They weren't friends, if that's what you're asking." She was emphatic on this point, too emphatic. After leaving Simone's house, Vance's next stop was the diner where Maya worked, The manager, a frazzled man with food stains on his apron, confirmed Maya had called in sick that morning. Real last minute, he grumbled. Not like her. Well, not like her old self anyway. Been distracted for the past couple months. Got a new boyfriend, I think. Some slick guy in a fancy car used to come in here all the time. Sit in her section. Vance showed him a photo of Tristan Cole. Yeah, that's him, the manager said without hesitation. Used to wait for her after her shift sometimes. Tipped big. Thought he was a little too smooth for his own good, you know? Vance and Sanchez exchanged a look. This directly contradicted Simone's claim that her daughter and Tristan barely knew each other. Simone was lying. The question was why? Was she protecting her daughter, or was she protecting herself? Back at the precinct, Vance put in a request for surveillance footage from the area around Simone's house and Forsyth Park. He had a hunch. While he waited, he ran a preliminary background check on Tristan Cole. The Atlanta address on his license was a P.O. box. There were a couple of minor priors for fraud from his early 20s, but nothing recent. He was a ghost, a man who seemed to exist only in the present. A few hours later, the first surveillance files came in. A traffic camera a few blocks from Simone's house showed Tristan Cole's black sedan driving away at 9:34 p.m., perfectly matching Simone's timeline. She seemed to be telling the truth. Vance was about to close the file when another image caught his eye. It was from a different camera, one mounted on a traffic light at the intersection of Drayton and Gaston Street, right at the northern edge of Forsyth Park. The timestamp was 11:52 p.m. The image was grainy, captured under the orange glow of a streetlight. It showed a car turning onto the quiet street that ran alongside the park, heading toward the more secluded southern end. It wasn't Tristan's sedan. It was an older model Chevy, pale blue, just like the one Vance had seen parked in Simone Dubois' driveway. Vance stared at the image, a cold certainty crystallizing in his gut. Simone hadn't just been the last person to see Tristan alive. She had followed him. Or she had arranged to meet him. Her entire story, the tearful performance of a grieving lover, was a carefully constructed lie. She hadn't stayed home after he left. She had driven to the park where he was murdered, at almost the exact time he was likely killed. The grieving girlfriend had just become his prime suspect. The all-points bulletin on Maya Dubois came back faster than Vance expected. A Savannah PD patrol officer, doing a routine check at the Greyhound bus station downtown, had spotted a young woman matching her description. She wasn't waiting for a bus. She was curled up on the floor of the women's restroom, barely conscious, an empty bottle of prescription pills and a half-empty bottle of vodka beside her. In her hand, she was clutching a one-way ticket to Los Angeles, California, for a bus that had departed an hour ago. Vance found her in a bed at the same hospital where her mother worked, a cruel irony that wasn't lost on him. Maya was hooked up to an IV, her face pale and puffy from crying, the defiant copper of her hair a stark mess against the white pillowcase. The doctors said she would be fine physically. They had pumped her stomach in time. Mentally, she was a wreck. "Maya, I'm Detective Vance," he said, his voice calm and low. "I need to ask you what happened last night." At the sound of his voice, her eyes fluttered open. They were filled with a terrifying cocktail of fear, guilt, and despair. "Did you find him?" she whispered, her voice a raw croak. "Did you find Tristan?" "We found him, Maya," Vance said gently. "He's dead. He was murdered last night in Forsyth Park." A choked sob escaped her lips, a sound of genuine pain. She closed her eyes, and tears streamed down her temples into her hair. "I knew it," she gasped. "I knew something terrible was going to happen." "Tell me what you knew," Vance pressed, sensing a crack in the dam. "Tell me about your plan." Maya's eyes snapped open, wide with panic. "Plan? What plan?" "The plan to take your mother's money," Vance stated, not as a question, but as a fact. "I know about it, Maya. I know you were with him. Lying now will only make it worse for you." The fight went out of her. The whole sordid story came pouring out in a torrent of tears and self-pity. She admitted to meeting Tristan, to falling for him, to telling him about her mother's hidden savings. But she framed it as a desperate escape plan, not a cold-hearted con. "I just wanted to get out of here," she cried. "He said he loved me. He promised we'd get married." "I didn't think he would. I thought he would just ask her for a loan or an investment. I never thought he would cheat her, not really." She told Vance about the final night. Tristan had called her after leaving her mother's house, his voice jubilant. "He got it," she whispered, shamefaced. "All of it. He told me to meet him at the Starlight Motel to get my share and finalize our plans to leave this morning." "What happened at the motel?" Vance asked. We were together," she stammered, looking away. "He was showing me the money, all that cash in his bag. He was so happy. And then his phone buzzed. He was in the bathroom, and I saw the screen light up. It was a text from some guy named Livoris." She paused, swallowing hard. "The message said, 'You ditched the girl yet? Can't wait to hit Miami with that cash.' And then I saw the rest of their conversation. He was laughing about my mom, calling her a lonely old fool. Now he told this Livoris guy that he was just using me for fun, that he was going to dump me at the bus station with a few $100s and disappear." Her tears turned from grief to rage. "He was playing us both. He used me to get to her money, and he was going to leave us both with nothing." She said they'd had a furious fight. She screamed at him, called him every name she could think of. He had laughed at her, telling her she was naive. She tried to grab the bag of money, and he shoved her away. "I was going to leave," she sobbed. "I swear, I was just going to run. But as I was yelling at him, there was a loud knock on the door, a really hard, angry knock." Vance leaned forward, his focus absolute. This was new. "Who was it?" "I don't know," she insisted, her eyes wide with what looked like genuine fear. Tristan looked out the peephole and his face just changed. He cursed under his breath and shoved me toward the bathroom. "Get in there and don't make a sound," he hissed. He looked terrified. "What did you hear?" "I heard the door open. I heard voices, angry. A man's voice and another one. I couldn't make it out. Then there was a loud crash, like something breaking. I panicked, detective. I wasn't going to stick around to see what happened. I unlocked the bathroom window and climbed out. I just ran. I ran and didn't look back." Vance studied her face. Her story was plausible. It painted her as a victim, betrayed and terrified, fleeing before the real violence began. It also conveniently introduced a mysterious, unknown attacker, maybe the Livoris from the text messages, coming to get his cut. It could be the truth, or it could be a very clever lie, designed to shift the blame away from the two women who had the most reason to want Tristan Cole dead. "There's one more thing, Maya," Vance said, his voice even. "We found a woman's bracelet in the motel room, a cheap silver one with a little star charm." Maya's hand instinctively went to her own wrist, which was bare. "It's mine," she whispered, her face paling. "I must have lost it during the fight. The bracelet placed her at the second crime scene, but her story, if true, created a huge problem for Vance's theory. If Maya fled and some other man arrived, then who killed Tristan in the park hours later? Unless she was lying. Unless the knock on the door was not an unknown man, but someone she knew all too well. The investigation had hit a wall, and the wall's name was Reasonable Doubt. They had two primary suspects, Simone and Maya Dubois. They had two compelling motives, a stolen life savings and a brutal romantic betrayal. They had two conflicting stories. Maya's account, with its mysterious knocker at the door, introduced the possibility of a third party, the Livoris from the texts, or some other enemy of Tristan Cole's. Simone, for her part, had lawyered up the moment Vance brought her in for a second interview, based on the surveillance footage of her car. She sat in the interrogation room, a picture of stoic silence, repeating only 5 words. "I want to speak to my lawyer." They had no murder weapon. The crime scene in the park was a muddy mess, compromised by the morning dew and the first responders. The motel room had Maya's fingerprints all over it, but that fit her story. They had a timeline, but it was full of holes. Frustration was mounting at the precinct. The captain was pushing for an arrest, but Vance knew they didn't have enough to make a charge stick on either woman. A good defense attorney would tear their circumstantial case to shreds. "We're missing the link," Vance said to Sanchez, staring at the whiteboard covered in timelines and question marks. "The piece that connects one of these women directly to the violence, the knife, the clothes, something." That's when he decided to go back to the beginning, to the park. He knew it was a long shot. The area had been searched, but crime scenes were rarely perfect. People get tunnel vision. They follow paths. They look where they expect to find things the killer, in a panic, might not have. He called the K-9 unit. An hour later, he was back at Forsyth Park, the morning's tourist crowds replaced by the quiet hush of late afternoon. He was met by Officer Chen's husband, Sergeant Mark Chen, a quiet, intense man who was the best K-9 handler on the force. At his side, alert and vibrating with contained energy, was Shadow, a formidable-looking Belgian Malinois, all black fur and intelligent, focused eyes. Shadow wasn't a drug dog or a bomb dog. He was a human remains detection and evidence search dog, trained to find things that didn't belong. The search area was focused on the path and about 20 feet in, Vance explained to Sergeant Chen, pointing toward the marsh. But the killer's car was parked over there. They would have had to cross this open field to get to the dump site. They might have panicked on the way back, tried to get rid of evidence before they got back to the street. Sergeant Chen nodded, absorbing the information. He gave Shadow a quiet command, "Seek," and a specific scent article from the victim. The dog began to work, not with the frantic energy of a retriever, but with a methodical, sweeping intensity, his nose hovering inches above the ground. He cleared the initial search area quickly, finding nothing. He worked his way along the route Vance had suggested, crisscrossing the field. For nearly an hour there was nothing but the sound of the wind in the Spanish moss and the soft panting of the dog. Vance felt his hopes begin to fade. It had been a long shot. Then Shadow's entire demeanor changed. He was near a large, gnarled live oak, far from the main path. He stopped, his head jerked up, and he tested the air. A low whine escaped his throat. Then he let out a sharp, definitive bark and bolted toward a dense, uninviting patch of overgrown brush and cattails near a drainage ditch, an area the initial search party had deemed too thick and swampy to bother with. "He's got something," Sergeant Chen said, his voice tight with anticipation as he followed the dog. Vance and Sanchez were right behind him. Shadow was digging furiously at the base of the brush, tearing at the damp soil and decaying leaves. Sergeant Chen pulled him back gently. "Easy, boy. Show me." Vance knelt, his heart pounding. Using a gloved hand, he brushed away the loose debris. At first, he saw nothing but dark, rich soil, but as he dug deeper, his fingers brushed against the slick, smooth surface of plastic. Carefully, he excavated it. It was a white, kitchen-sized trash bag, tied in a tight knot and shoved deep into the mud. The smell hit them as soon as he loosened the knot. The coppery, metallic scent of blood. The air grew still and heavy. Vance carefully opened the bag under the watchful eye of the crime scene photographer who had been shadowing them. Inside, nestled together, was a woman's dark blue blouse and a pair of black slacks, both stiff and dark, with a massive amount of dried blood. Wrapped inside the clothes, as if to muffle it, was the missing piece of the puzzle. It was a simple kitchen knife, an 8-inch chef's knife from a common department store block set. Its blade was stained a dark, ugly brown. Vance stood up and looked back at Sergeant Chen, who was giving Shadow a quiet, rewarding pat. The dog had done what human eyes had missed. He had found the link. "Tell me you remember what was in Simone Dubois' kitchen," Vance said to Sanchez. Sanchez nodded, her face grim. "A wooden knife block, with one empty slot. Looked just like that one. They had it. They had the weapon. They had the bloody clothes. The net had just been pulled tight." The interrogation room felt smaller this time, the air sucked out of it by the weight of the evidence sitting in a file on the table between Detective Vance and Simone Dubois. Her lawyer, a tired-looking public defender, sat beside her, but Simone seemed beyond his help. Her stoicism had crumbled, replaced by a brittle, fragile stillness. The fight was gone. Vance didn't start with accusations. He started with her daughter. "Simone, we found Maya. She's at Memorial. She tried to take her own life." The news hit Simone like a physical blow. Her carefully composed mask shattered, and a raw, maternal anguish broke through. "Maya? Oh my God, is she okay?" "She's going to be okay," Vance said, his voice softening. "She told us everything, Simone, about the plan, about her relationship with Tristan, about how they plan to use you to get your money." Simone closed her eyes, her face contorting in a grimace of such profound pain that Vance almost felt a pang of pity. This was the true wound, deeper than any financial loss. The betrayal by her own child. "We found the clothes, Simone," Vance continued, sliding a series of glossy photos across the table. The blood-soaked blouse, the stained pants. "In a trash bag in Forsyth Park." And we found this. He placed a photo of the kitchen knife on top. Your fingerprints are on the handle, and the blood on the clothes and the knife is a match for Tristan Cole. He let the evidence hang in the air, a silent, irrefutable chorus of accusation. Simone stared at the photos, her face ashen. The fight was over. The lies had nowhere left to hide. Her lawyer leaned in and whispered something to her. She just shook her head, a slow, defeated gesture. Then she looked up, her gaze meeting Vance's directly. Her eyes were dry, burned out. "I followed him," she said, her voice a low, raspy whisper. The confession, when it came, was not a breakdown, but a slow, deliberate unburdening. After he left with the money, that feeling, that terrible, cold feeling, wouldn't leave me. I knew I'd made a mistake. I got in my car. I didn't know where I was going, but I saw his taillights a few blocks ahead, and I just followed. She hadn't followed him to the motel. She said she lost him in traffic, but had a gut feeling he was headed downtown. She drove aimlessly for a while, her mind racing, before deciding to go to the one place they had talked about walking through together, Forsyth Park. She parked her car, needing to clear her head. As she walked toward the fountain, she saw his car parked on a dark side street, and then she saw them, figures illuminated by a distant streetlight near the edge of the woods, Tristan and Maya. "I saw her run," Simone said, her voice flat, devoid of emotion. "I hid behind a tree. I saw her climb out of his car and just run away, crying. I waited until she was gone. Then I walked over to him." Tristan was standing by his car, looking irritated. When he saw Simone emerge from the shadows, his annoyance turned to a sneer. "I asked him," Simone continued, her hands clenching into fists on the table. "I asked him, 'Are you sleeping with my daughter? Did you two plan this together to steal my money?' According to Simone, he didn't even try to deny it. He laughed, a cold, cruel laugh that echoed in the quiet park. He said I should be grateful, that he gave my daughter a good time and that he was about to make her a little bit richer. He told me he was taking my money and leaving town with her. He said we were both fools." Vance watched her, letting her tell the story in her own time. He could see the scene playing out in his mind, the foggy park, the two figures, the devastating revelation. "I told him he was a monster." Simone's voice began to tremble with a resurgent rage. "I tried to get the bag of money from his car. He grabbed me. He was so strong. He pushed me against the car and got right in my face." She took a shaky breath, and when she spoke again, her voice was laced with a venom that made the air in the room crackle. "And then he said it. The thing that broke everything." She looked Vance straight in the eye, her own eyes burning with the memory. He said, "You really think a man like me would ever be interested in some tired, old, broke-down black woman like you? You were just a means to an end. Easy. Just like your daughter. She was fun, but I'm done with her too. Tomorrow, I'm gone with my money, and you two pathetic bitches can cry on each other's shoulders. He called me. He called us." She couldn't finish the sentence. The racial slur, combined with the raw, misogynistic cruelty, hung unspoken in the air. It was the ultimate humiliation. He hadn't just stolen her money. He had stolen her dignity, weaponized her race, her age, and her womanhood against her, and reduced her and her child to worthless objects. "That's when you snapped," Vance said quietly, more a statement than a question. Simone nodded, a single tear finally escaping and tracing a path down her cheek. "I don't remember getting the knife. I kept a small one in my glove compartment for protection. I don't remember opening his car door to get it. I just remember the feel of the handle in my hand." He saw it, and he laughed again. He said, "What are you going to do, old lady? Stab me?" Her gaze went distant, lost in the horror of the memory. "I just saw red. All the years of being quiet, of working hard, of being dismissed and overlooked. It all just came out. I hit him, and I kept hitting him. I didn't stop until he stopped laughing." The room was silent, except for the quiet hum of the air conditioner. Simone Dubois sat there, no longer a suspect, but a confessed killer. A woman pushed past the absolute limit of her endurance by a double-barrel blast of betrayal and bigotry. The confession was complete. The case was closed. But for Vance, looking at the broken woman before him, it felt less like a victory and more like the final, tragic chapter of a story where everyone had lost. The trial of Simone Dubois was a somber, swift affair. The Savannah media portrayed it as a lurid tale of a love triangle gone wrong, a story of sex, money, and murder under the Spanish moss. But in the quiet, wood-paneled courtroom, the reality was far more tragic. Simone's public defender argued passionately for a lesser charge of manslaughter, painting a vivid picture of a woman suffering from extreme emotional disturbance. He argued that Tristan Cole's calculated cruelty, his financial and emotional devastation of Simone, and finally, his vicious, racially charged verbal assault, constituted a provocation so profound that it caused a temporary break from sanity. The prosecution, however, argued for murder. They presented the facts coldly and logically. Simone had followed him. She had a weapon. She had stabbed him not once or twice in a moment of passion, but multiple times in a sustained, furious attack. The jury, a panel of Savannah citizens, deliberated for 2 days. In the end, they found Simone Dubois guilty of second-degree murder. The judge sentenced her to 25 years to life in prison. Maya was not charged, but her sentence was a different kind of prison. She had to live with the unbearable weight of her choices. She had set the entire tragedy in motion. Her greed and desperation had created the opening for a predator like Tristan Cole to enter their lives. She had betrayed her mother, which led to a man's death and her mother's incarceration. She was a pariah in her own story, left alone in the small, silent bungalow. The empty space beneath the floorboards a constant screaming reminder of the cost of her desires. Detective Isaiah Vance sat at his desk weeks later, the completed case file for State vs. Dubois sitting on the corner. He looked out his window at the bustling Savannah streets below. He had solved the case, gotten a conviction. By all measures, it was a professional success. But he felt no satisfaction. He thought of the 3 people whose lives had collided with such devastating force. Tristan Cole, a con man whose entire existence was built on exploiting the loneliness and hope of others. A man who had finally met a victim whose pain was sharper than his greed. Maya, a young woman so blinded by her dream of escape that she had been willing to sacrifice her own mother, only to find herself more trapped than ever. And finally he thought of Simone, a good woman, a hard-working nurse who had spent her life caring for others. A woman who, at 55, had dared to believe she was worthy of love and a second chance, only to have that hope weaponized against her. She had invested her body, her heart, and her life savings, and in return had been handed the bitterest of truths. The blow to her pride, as a woman, as a mother, and as a black woman, had been too much to bear. Cole's words had been the spark that ignited a lifetime of suppressed slights and silent struggles into an inferno of rage. Vance closed his eyes, the final image from the crime scene photos flashing in his mind. The open gym bag, the stacks of cash, $85,000, the product of years of weary labor, spilled out and stained with the blood of the man who had stolen it. The money was just paper, but it had represented everything: security, dreams, and ultimately, the catalyst for destruction. He signed his name on the final report and closed the thick folder. Another case closed. Another story of human weakness written into the city's official record. There were no winners in this story, only losers. It was a stark and brutal reminder of a lesson as old as time itself. In the desperate chase for a better life, we can sometimes mistake the mirage for the oasis. But when that illusion shatters, the fallout can be deadly. The most dangerous lies are not the ones others tell us, but the ones we desperately want to be true. Simone Dubois' tragedy wasn't just that she was conned by a predator. It was that she was betrayed by her own deep, human, and ultimately fatal hope.